Hello and welcome to The Swing. As always, it's your boy HK, and I'm joined by my co-host Owais as we get to break down, as always, every Tuesday, every Friday at 7:30 p.m. live on SportsTrends, everything that's going on in the basketball world. The highs, the lows, the step backs, the travels, the refs. But today, we get to really focus on what was a suffocating performance by the Boston Celtics yesterday as they took down the Toronto Raptors in pretty convincing fashion. And beyond that, we'll break down everything that's been going on in the league over the last couple of days. We got the returns back for the second round of NBA All-Star voting. There's been a bit of movement in that, but we're starting to see a little bit more clarity about where the All-Star starters are going to be looking. Plus, we're starting to see a little bit more solidity in teams being placed within their conferences, respectively. We're starting to see the cream of the crop really make their moves, come out on top, and especially in a conference like the East, where we are seeing a lot of matchups that could determine who goes where. We're going to spend some time today also talking about just who the elites of the East are and just where they could potentially end up once the playoffs start. That being said, before we get to that, I do want to introduce, as always, our sponsor, Thrive Fantasy. Now, for those who don't know, Thrive Fantasy is a daily prop betting website in which you get to choose between 20 to 25 options on a day, from which you have to pick 10. And really, it's simple. If you know how many points LeBron is going to score in a night, how many rebounds Joel Embiid is going to grab on a night, or how many blocks Miles Turner is going to swat away on a night, put those knowledge to the test on Thrive Fantasy, where you can make daily prop bets, join daily contests by using the promo code SWING, which is SWING. You will get 100% of your deposit matched up to $50. So definitely sign up, use promo code SWING, and sign up and prop up today. Owais, how's it going, man?
It's one of those situations. Why? Because the Toronto Raptors got outclassed yesterday in their test game against our nemesis, the Boston Celtics. Now, I want to remind everybody, I am someone who's extremely critical. I demand perfection, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I will expect that perfection every single time, because the Raptors, of course, are not a perfect record right now. But you have to understand, in a situation where we have played 5 games in a span of 7 days, it takes a huge toll on the body. So you look at some of the wins that we've had, they've also been very physical, gutsy wins. So you think about coming into a game on a back-to-back, mind you, against a star-studded, well-coached Boston Celtics team. Quite frankly, are without your best defender, but also are a lot bigger than you in terms of size. It'll take its toll, and it absolutely did. We saw fatigue right off the bat, especially defending that perimeter. I don't know if the team was on the same page, especially on the defensive end of things, but also shots coming up short. But what they did do, there are still some positives to take away from this entire game, which we will get to eventually. So, HK, what did you think about that game?
Look, you summed it up quite nicely as it was. It's one of those games where heavy legs play such a role, because we know how Boston plays. They're just an incredibly physical team that loves to play at their pace, that loves to be able to really make you work hard for any individual basket. And much as we saw in our previous game against them, often we're able to do quite a good job against their primary scorers, but it's the secondary ones that we then struggle to be able to actually contain. And you know what? Frankly, that's the reality of any good NBA offense. where, these other guys are able to go ahead and clean it up. And that's really what happened. I mean, we saw in Semi Ojeleye, in Peyton Pritchard, like two guys that are both averaging single-digit points, 4.8 specifically for Semi Ojeleye, about 6 for Peyton Pritchard, go off for 20-point nights each. And they did it because they did it on the perimeter. I mean, we'll get an opportunity to be able to see just how much trouble we were finding ourselves in with the size, first of all, of Daniel Theis. But as we see, those corner threes were absolutely monstrous. Like, just getting to a point where there was so much disruption that was being created in the middle to give those corner threes. And even the ones that we were contesting, I mean, look, once you get a guy that's hot, that's going to be the case. But what I really didn't like about this is that we were late on so many of these contests. There was just too many scenarios, exactly, where it's too little too late, man.
Yeah. Look at this clip, for example, right over here, just before this shot that Ojeleye hit. You look at the scrambling going on here. This is Boucher bites, and there's 4 or 5 guys in the paint, leaving almost 2-3 guys. Like, at that point, Jaylen Brown could have dished it out to any one of those guys. And it comes down to A, communication, B, fatigue, but also just the excellent way that the Boston Celtics broke down our defense, because they knew that our guys were going to double and kind of almost make it claustrophobic right there in the paint, which led, those open guys. It led to those open guys. And, a big part of that spacing actually came from a guy like Daniel Theis. He not only made it difficult for them not to protect the paint, because if they didn't, that's their second option. They'll just alley-oop it on the pick and roll, and it's game over, right? So
I wanted to take a second on Daniel Theis, because part of what has always made Daniel Theis just so annoying is these kind of scenarios where it's all about timing. Again, that Boucher is always going to be able to out-jump you, but it's just one of those things where Daniel Theis is just such an intelligent rim runner for the Boston Celtics that he's able to make up the fact that his athleticism is not there to the same extent, where it goes back to, we have Chris Boucher, we have Pascal Siakam, these guys who are able to essentially make up their mistakes with regards to, their fundamentals when it comes down to offensive rebounding, when it comes down to just rebounding in general. And the Boston Celtics just absolutely destroyed us in a scenario where they were just left to essentially bully you around on the inside. And on a day where, look, we expected that we're going to have some difficulties with regards to the rebounding, Tristan Thompson himself out-rebounded on the offensive glass the entire Toronto Raptors, and you just can't have that.
Yeah, I mean, if we go back and we take a look at some of those corner threes as well, like actually, we don't really need to, but it almost was identical to how the game plan was against the Raptors last year in the playoffs. And the trauma that I felt then came back in this game. And so I was getting so frustrated with how open everybody was. And, I tend to forget that's, 5 games in 7 days. So these guys are really, really tired. But at the end of the day, like, this is a team that has always had our number in the last year or so. And in a way where, like, we just look very G League type of team. And it's kind of embarrassing. But what I will say, there are a lot of positives to take away from this, which we'll get to. The negatives is we actually didn't play our game. And what does that mean? We did not really try to shoot threes. We are, I believe, the leading volume 3 shooting team, and one of the top field goal percentage from 3-point land as well. And we hardly shot the threes. Probably half of what we usually shoot was shot in this game. And part of it had to do with, of course, the great defense that, Boston had played on us, but also the game plan. As you can see, our next little point over here is the slash and crash. The Toronto Raptors actually scored most of their points inside the paint, and it was actually a beautiful thing to see. Let's take a look. So right off the bat, you saw Kyle Lowry sort of attack the basket even if we were down a little bit early. Look at this, Boucher cutting, and it just seemed, because technically Boston is still pretty undersized in terms of their bigs. So we went right at them, and it was very effective. The only issue was, the Raptors kept letting points go on the other end, and it got frustrating after a while. And when you see that happen, it demoralizes the defense, right? And it demoralizes the offense. And when you can't really get into rhythm and your feet aren't with you, it's really hard. But one person in particular I really wanted to highlight was, I saw a lot of positives in Pascal's game. Look at this. Post-game hooks. This is what we need from him to develop that mid-range, kind of post up back to the basket sort of game. And he made a few big ones on Ojale with confidence, and a few big ones against Williams as well late in the fourth quarter when we were trying to get back into the game. And look at the way that he absolutely uses his speed. His speed. So he's showing them body first, and then when he sees the opportunity where they expect, almost like that physicality, he uses his finesse, his speed, and drives by. And I love that about him and his game yesterday. And I really think that if he continues to improve in that area, I swear to you, it'll be a completely different story. And now the name of the game still ended up being not just fatigue, but threes will win games. Absolutely. Over the paint, right? So even if, let's say, the Raptors scored more field goals, the threes added up on the end against, a team that has no reason to be that good at shooting threes, but they did.
Yeah, then look, in the end, it's part and parcel of, once a team gets on a run, especially a team gets on a run from the corner, it's very easy to rack up points in an absolute hurry because your defense is now in scramble mode. You're left wondering about where it is that you can best, actually hedge your bets. Where is it that you can stop them? Because I said, we did a great job by and large on Jason Tatum. We did a very solid job on Jaylen Brown. Both of those guys were kept well below their season averages, both which is about the 27-point mark, each scoring in the teens. But where it then becomes an issue is exactly what you said. You let Boston drag you down into their game. We shot 28 threes, hitting 9, and that 9 was not only a season low, but it's also the first time in not only just this season, but the last 15 games of the last regular season in which we didn't score at least 10 3-pointers. So it was clearly a game in which, you can say the fatigue caught up into it because as we all know, the 3-pointers is the ultimate test of your legs, of your quads, all of those, the parts that get most tired. A shooter is tired when the ball is hitting front rim instead of going back, right? There's just not getting any legs in the shot. And I think that was most evident, especially in Norman Powell yesterday, who has been on an absolute tear, has been just our best offensive threat for this entire stretch in which OG has been out, and he's been asked to come back into the starting lineup, averaging over 20 points there and shooting about 48% from the 3-point line. So it's been just an absolute revelation. And, to Syed Kermani's point over here about the confidence side, that is definitely a factor as well. Boston has consistently been a matchup that is an annoyance for the Toronto Raptors. And we're going to get into a little bit about how matchups really do matter a lot, especially in the East. But when it comes to a divisional rival in the Boston Celtics, that you're going to see them multiple times throughout the year. So it's often a situation of, adjustments. We saw Brad Stevens talk about this in the game, lead up to the game itself. First of all, putting respect on the name of the Toronto Raptors. Everyone had been talking about how badly the Toronto Raptors had started. Everyone had been talking about how, this could be a lottery team. It's stupid things, right?
Casual.
But exactly. It's just not a basketball insightful comment to see that, because as I said, we saw the plus minuses on the floor. We saw the performances that the Raptors are putting up, but it was an inconsistency on it. But for Brad Stevens to come out and essentially say that the playoff series last year, first of all, was some of the most fun he ever had coaching. In fact, one of the great series in his mind, and I will agree.
I agree.
It was just an absolute tactical battle, and that's what we get every time we face up against the Boston Celtics. So it's just not a matchup that is ever going to be an easy one either way, and you have to beat them by committee.
Yeah, and it's funny that we absolutely have to mention the chess game, because even in this game, it seemed as if every single time we tried to change up the game plan. Both these coaches are very big on being adaptive to what the situation is.
Yeah.
But and that's the fun of it. Was it fun for Toronto Raptors fans from a perspective of we love our team and don't want to see their butts get kicked? But from a basketball perspective and purely like the art of how to counter or set the tone, I just absolutely love Brad Stevens, and I still think that this is a very close situation in terms of not the talent level, but just how good both teams are in terms of their systems.
Yeah.
But I will always still give the edge to the Boston Celtics, just because I feel like their starting five is still better than our starting five. And when it comes down to the playoffs and things of that nature, generally the better five end up being the better team. And the only way it kind of flips is if you speak of matchups. Those matchups are not in the favor of the better team. So, for example, if it was flipped, if Siakam was on Boston and Jaylen Brown was on the Raptors, you would see that same struggle, because even if Boston, let's say, for example, were the better team, quote unquote, you're stopping their best player. Not best player, but like one of the best players on a team. And it just changes the dynamic of that series. But overall, one thing we forget is OG wasn't there, right? And you saw last year in the playoffs how effective that guy was against the Boston Celtics, and having that extra body and someone who can guard pretty much every position. That would have been huge. And yes, I would definitely need a haircut, but who knows? Some people might actually enjoy this haircut.
Yeah.
So we're just gonna keep it at that. But all in all, great series. And I'm looking. Do I want to play him in the playoffs? No, because the trauma that it gave me last year and just how much emotion and just the craziness of that series is difficult for my mental health. Okay.
Absolutely.
But it would be a fantastic basketball series.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. It's part of why, in my mind, I actually, in many ways, like watching Eastern Conference basketball more so than the West, is just because of these tactical battles that you're getting over there. Because for years and years and years, the West has always been the more talented conference of the two, the more offensively explosive of the two. Any given night, you could get a 20-point blowout between two teams that are very evenly matched otherwise, just because an individual was able to get that hot. On the East, especially with the teams that are up being defensive juggernauts, whether it be the Bucks, whether it be the Sixers, whether it be the Celtics, and whether it be the Raptors, right? These are all teams that are absolutely defense first, grind it out affairs. And I think that's a perfect segue into what somebody's talking about in terms of, what are the goals, not just for the Raptors, but just the goals for all of these teams that are kind of on the precipice. And I maintain the Raptors have the youth on their side. They've got a core on their side, and they have basically the experience on their side, not only having deep playoff runs under their belt, not only having a championship under their belt, but having all of that and going through these grinded out battles means that we are once again in that same kind of position that we were when the Kawhi trade happened. It's that same scenario in which you are that superstar away in terms of unlocking that last bit of what juice you need on the offensive end to be able to take it that way through. And for those who watch the swing all per often, Kevin is one of our very common viewers. He always has this word that he's now attached to the Raptors for the entire season, and that word is development. And development is the only goal at this moment for the Toronto Raptors, because that is where you're going to be able to find that next level of these other guys so that when an opportunity comes for a superstar to be able to, take that next step for a team, you're in place to be able to unlock that.
Yeah. And, some of the things that we have to look at is the responsibility. And we've talked about this in our previous podcasts and streams, is that the responsibility was shielded almost by guys like Ibaka, the vets, Marc Gasol, Kawhi at the time, Kyle Lowry. But when you get those big contracts and you realize you're the future of this team and you become the core of this team, the responsibility of not just being a leader for, remembering that this is your team now, but secondly is just working on your game in a way that you improve year to year, right? Improvement is key. And so, guys like Pascal, he came into the league, no one cared about him, right? Absolutely no one cared about him. Yep. And he showed everybody through the hard work that, as a second, third option, people are not doing their scouting report on him. And he's just feasting on people with his speed and his really, really great ability near the basket. And then he developed more of a shot from the three-point line. Corner threes, Pascal was something that was so fun to watch back in the day. But you take a look at a guy like Fred VanVleet. He is somebody who came from nothing, didn't get drafted. And now he's here as a core piece to the success of the Toronto Raptors, right? So right now, they're feeling the after effects of what it means to be a central player on a team. So people will be having defensive schemes against them, right? They're going to be double teamed a lot more now. And that's something they're not used to. But everything is just focused centrally on them. And that's something they're adjusting to. So even the best players in the league take some time before they really get to that elite level. And that process, that's why this year, as much as, we always say we want a championship from this team, every single year we can do it. That's always been the mentality.
Want to win, baby. It's want to win.
Want to win.
Wanting to win.
So is that possible? Anything's possible. But is that likely? No. The reason why is these guys, will pretty much be developing all the intangibles in their game. And you'll see that whether or not we, make some moves during this, trade deadline, or if in the offseason, there's anyone kind of available for like a sign and trade or whatever the situation is. Point is even with this core, we are still one of the best teams in the NBA. And as they continue in their prime and get into these situations of like close games, coming back, maintaining leads, getting triple team, double team, whatever the situation is, those reps come in and you will see that these guys will emerge to be much better players over the season.
Exactly. No, you couldn't have said it any better in that, right? You get these reps in, you get that exposure when the lights are brightest, so that then when the lights aren't as bright because another guy's taking those away from you, you can go ahead and just kick them when they aren't seeing you.
Yeah, and it reminds me actually of Kyle and DeMar's story, right? Both of those guys absolutely knew that they were great players, but to even get to that all-star level or to carry a team to the playoffs, they had to continue working on their game. And then there were situations where they had to deal with adversity. We got swept by the Washington Wizards, right? And in a situation where we thought we actually had a great team that year, right? Then we go against LeBron, and each year it's the same story, right?
I don't remember.
It's the same story. Swept. Can't get past LeBron. But did that mean that, DeMar and Kyle were making the same mistakes and stuff like that? No, you actually look at how they played. They got better and better over the course of that kind of era of the Toronto Raptors until, the stars aligned, Kawhi came. The only difference between that team was literally Kawhi.
I mean, that's
maybe Marc Gasol, but the identity of the team, the core guys, like Kyle Lowry's still there. He was the heart of the team. So whatever happened with this team is because of him. And what did happen is just that extension of like a Danny Green or a Kawhi that kind of really elevated them, or Marc Gasol. But the pieces were there. I still think we would have been Eastern Conference finalists easily with the same team that we had going into the season.
Yeah. Like I said, the last year is always something that I find really interesting. One, because obviously COVID playoffs were something completely different. And I mean, the Raptors continue to face completely different scenarios, having essentially 72 away games this year, right?
Yeah,
but, I wanted to segue, into that idea of the matchups that we've been speaking about, right? If we look at the Raptors and Celtics series, and then we look at the Heat and Celtics series that happened thereafter, it's actually just eerily similar in terms of how it went down. And the way was the same. You had to win the series by committee. The difference was Bam Adebayo on the Miami Heat had an incredible series, essentially what you were hoping Pascal would be able to do. In fact, it's very like everyone else. You talk about the other guys, Jimmy, Goran, all those guys for the Heat. They actually scored less than Bam did in that because it was just a completely committee-based effort, and that's exactly how the Toronto Raptors have been successful for all of these years, even before they were able to get a Kawhi to help push that forward. So when we get to the playoffs, to me, that's where it's going to come down to. These reps are going to lead you to a greater win by committee effort, and because you have these reps down in which you're the first option, 1A, 1B, that's where you'll be able to go ahead and deal with that.
Absolutely. So now, talking about, this whole NBA situation, Kawhi coming in, that's something where we got from a trade. Any rumors that you're hearing these days, or do you want to segue into the NBA All-Star game? What is up?
Well, I mean, the thing about the rumor mill is that it's always spinning. So it's there's just so many options. I think we're going to actually dedicate some time in an episode to dealing with that as we get closer to the trade deadline. But the NBA All-Star game is definitely something that's more in the near horizon and something that is continuously of interest, not only because apparently you can outright say you don't want to play in the All-Star game, yet be the leading vote getter. At the same time that we're starting to see a little bit more separation in between who are likely to be the starters, because as far as I can see from the three front court guys and the two backcourt guys for both conferences, it's unlikely that the media is going to vote, or the as in fellow players are going to vote that much more different than what we're seeing here. So, LeBron and Jokic, as well as Kawhi Leonard, are going to head the front court for the West. You get Steph Curry, who, by the way, Steph Curry, I'm going to talk about Steph.
Yeah, please do.
We're going to spend a little bit of time on that because it's been an absolutely insane. This is the best version of Steph that I like seeing. It's pretty much back to 2016. But as you quickly look at the East, we're seeing that Durant and Giannis are leading it alongside Embiid. And then you get Bradley Beal and Kyrie in the back. So really, I mean, most of it kind of picks itself. I still, in my mind, think that Harden should be there starting over Kyrie, but it doesn't matter. They're both going to be in the All-Star game. But what's your basic take on this?
Well, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. The few that I have absolutely no idea why, like we have Alex Caruso in there, and it's just a point. But Russell Westbrook, why the hell is he in this at all? Derrick Rose, like we love him, and it's kind of insane that he still is able to generate so many the fan base is so loyal that he's still able to get this many votes for being someone who's more of a second role right now. Even though I do think now that he's back on New York, that he's going to have a more central role, which is really exciting actually if the New York Knicks make the playoffs this year. So anyway, pretty self-explanatory. One thing is I'm just confused how everything's going to work. Like I know the All-Star game is a little bit difficult because these many different players from many different teams, lots can go wrong, and they were talking about how they wanted to have the slam dunk contest or the 3-point contest during the halftime of the All-Star game and things like that of that nature, just so they can condense everything into one day. From a fan's perspective, I mean, last year was probably the most entertaining All-Star game that I've seen in my lifetime.
Absolutely.
So, to just kind of carry that forward and hopefully have a similar situation this year would have been great. I don't know if they're doing it in a way where they're having that draft again, the fantasy draft.
Oh, they absolutely will. Yeah.
Captains. Okay. Yeah. Cause that was
the best. That's a lock now as far as
it has to.
Yeah.
But
As
it
we
would be
said.
cool. It
Yeah.
would actually be really, really cool if instead of Giannis and LeBron being the guys to be captains this year, or maybe once again,
KD and LeBron.
KD and LeBron, whatever the situation, because Giannis was just like, I'm going to get my international boys in here and we're going to see where it goes. We're going to make a practical team versus a star-studded team. But that still didn't work out because we had a guy named Kemba Walker on our team, and he ruined it for us. Okay.
Hey, man, it got down to a free throw from Anthony Davis to go about and win a game in a type of all-star game that people thought was going to be an absolute blowout. So if you get people to care about the game, which is exactly what happened last year, one, because obviously of the entire Kobe Bryant and everything that went with that. And I mean, just an incredibly emotional game from that perspective, but just the format of it just made so much more sense, not only from a competition standpoint, but you made each quarter worth something in and of itself. So I usually skip the actual All-Star game, right? I love the events. I love the dunk contest. I love the three-point contest, but usually skip the All-Star game. That format made me tune into it minute by minute as if I was watching like a playoff game.
Absolutely. And that's how it should be. Honestly, it has to be that way. One thing I do remember and I recall from the All-Star game, I don't know about you guys watching right now. If you remember anything, if you do, you should definitely comment. Let us know some of your favorite I guess plays from that All-Star game. But when Embiid had that dream shake on LeBron James, that was insanity. And then Kyle Lowry picking up the charge. I'm like, this game, like if there's any source, like the entertainment that we received from thick booty Kyle Lowry and Joel Embiid, just how everything worked. Giannis blocking LeBron,
it's off the chain,
off the charts, and we want to see that again.
I absolutely agree. It was just so much fun, and I mean that's really what it's about, and that's where I think as much as I can see the perspective of, hey, it's a COVID season, we're already dealing with X and X issues. I mean, we need a little positivity going on here. So I will go on record and say I disagree with the stance of LeBron James and these guys saying that it's it's unnecessary, it's useless, because not only does the game itself get that opportunity to get those kind of moments, but it's also in many ways for these guys who aren't perennial all-stars, a once in what could be a lifetime or a career moment for these guys. And I mean, to me, especially this year, there's just so many guys that I think could be making their first appearance in an all-star game. One, whether it be because the teams that are meant to be doing really, really well are slightly underperforming, which means you may see less stars from their team get into the actual all-star game. But more so than that, just guys who are really making their name known in scenarios where otherwise they may have been buried.
Drop some names. Drop some names.
Absolutely. First and foremost, the one that jumps to me is Malcolm Brogdon, who I already talked about in the previous All-Star picks, who I think should be good enough to be a starter for the East, but an absolute shoo-in to be able to get into the All-Star game. Other one, Tobias Harris. Tobias Harris for the Philadelphia 76ers should be an all-star this year, not just because the Sixers are number one in the East and playing just an absolutely deadly level of ball at the moment, especially, where they've struggled away from home. They have an above 500 record there. And a lot of that is because Tobias is shooting absolutely lights out, having a career season, and has finally gotten a role that best utilizes his talents. And the third guy who I think finally deserves to be able to get into the All-Star game is going to be from the Chicago Bulls, Zach Levine. Give Zach Levine.
Whoa. Those that don't know, this guy is the biggest hater of Zach Levine. And now he's just flipped so quickly.
I'm not flipped. No. Let me preface this. Let me get into this.
Okay, go, please. I want to hear what you got to say. I'm excited.
Absolutely. And I know you were waiting for this. So Zach Levine, first and foremost, my biggest complaint about Zach throughout his NBA career has been just his inability to string two good games together. It's always been a scenario of where he is the ultimate in streak. His numbers will always come out because when he's hot, he is freaking torching. But what's changed this year is, especially on a Chicago team that's dealing with more injuries, he has come out and truly accepted the leadership role on this Bulls squad and is bringing them up against matchups that they have no business winning and coming out on top. So it's all about giving credit where credit is due. And Zach Levine, who is having a career best season, not only shooting 52% from the field, which is insane for a guard, but he's doing it while shooting 43% from three on volume and in the top 5 in points per game in the league. So get the man in. He deserves it more than Bradley Beal. I'll throw it out.
Hey. Listen, they both deserve it. I'm not going to compare the two, but what I will say, one of the craziest things about the Zach Levine scoring so effectively is they're mainly on jumpers. And that's the scary thing, right? You remember Zach Levine being one of those guys who was just a slasher and, high flyer, like very, people would compare him to Vince Carter or whatever the situation is. But he worked so hard on his game and he's developed himself so much as in terms of like an offensive, like just phenom. And he was getting to that stage, especially from a shot perspective, when he was on Minnesota. I actually think he was getting there. But what ended up happening was like injury troubles and things of that nature, and then eventually getting traded. And, last year, I don't think, if someone asked me like what they thought about Zach Levine, I said this guy is easily an all-star last year. I said I really wanted him to be there. And I'm like, it's just because Chicago's really crap right now that he's not going to get in there. Similar to like a Bradley Beal situation where he was balling out, but he didn't get any love. Devin Booker, same situation. Like these guys don't get the love because they're on crappy teams. But, you look at the eye test and everybody says, eye test is stupid. It's analytical. The analytic people are like, inefficiency, blah, 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 blah. But listen. I don't care what anyone says. He's been on bad teams, horribly coached teams. And then what happens is you put him in a spot where, he's able to be himself and kind of, have the central, role instead of a guy like Wiggins. As you can see, there's a huge difference between the two guys. Minnesota had it twisted. They went with Wiggins being the guy and Levine being a side piece. No. They got it all wrong. And he's accepted his role. And this is why when we were talking about trades that could potentially happen for the Toronto Raptors, I don't know if Zach Levine's necessarily happy in Chicago, but if there was a way we can keep our core or trade away maybe one or two pieces to get in a guy like Zach Levine, I think this takes us to another level in terms of our offensive game. And I will be the biggest Zach Levine fan. I am one of the biggest Zach Levine fans.
I know you are.
Toronto, we have that guy that we can rely on in the clutch. He has a mid-range. He has insanity when it comes to 3 points, and the clutch gene is in him. We've seen it. So, dudes, make it happen if we can. But also, I understand his development. I'm getting excited talking about Levine, and I'm loving it.
Bit too hype, man. Bit too hype. Well, why don't you tell me about some guys that you have been really impressed by? And maybe not necessarily, maybe they are all-stars, maybe they aren't, but who has really impressed you this year?
Jaylen Brown. I think when people forget, I don't know if he is getting the credit he deserves, but Jaylen Brown is also one of those guys that has developed his game so much in the past 3 years. Like it's a world's difference between who he was 3 years ago to who he's now. And imagine, he's played with the likes of Gordon Hayward, Jason Tatum, Kemba Walker, and Kyrie Irving. And he's just soaked up all that knowledge and become not just a defensive threat, but an offensive threat. You can see a lot of similarities between him and, just like those traditional wings that we used to have back in the day, like the Vince Carters, the Tracy McGrady's, having those fadeaways now and left hand, what the hell? The triple threat position, he gets everybody with. And now they have to respect the shot too, which is kind of crazy to me. So I definitely think that he should be up there in the conversation, even if you say that Tatum is the main guy, but hey, give him that seat at the very end. I'm okay with that. And maybe that's my pick if I was to give it to somebody.
Fair enough. No, man, you're absolutely on there. Again, credit where credit's due. Jaylen is having an incredible year. Again, on a personal level, have never been a huge fan of his game in terms of how he also comes into a situation we'll get into this. This is a whole different conversation, but I feel like Owais just getting this opportunity to have Jaylen Brown and Zach Levine back to back. Just look at that smile. Look at that smile on this man.
They're my boys. What do you mean? I need these guys. They need to.
And I know
Yep
Kirmani, who's Baba's Bites, by the way, is also a huge Jaylen Brown and Zach Levine fan. And
Baba knows, man.
Baba knows
biryani.
Points.
Baba knows basketball. Okay.
Baba knows basketball. No doubt. And like I said, it's great to have, these young superstars that are in their development really starting to shine. And we're seeing that. It just makes the NBA just that much more exciting to watch on a night in, night out basis. And I think it's interesting that, the guys that we've talked about so far are all Eastern Conference guys because, as we know, the West is just absolutely loaded with stars. And oftentimes, one guy amongst others that kind of gets thrown under just because of the fact that, one, he's on a really crappy team, and two, because the West is just so loaded. And that guy's De'Aaron Fox. Mm-hmm. I think De'Aaron Fox is just one of those guys who's just always been just missed out because of the fact that Sacramento has been so incredibly terrible for so long. But on a team that's gotten to 500 now, which just goes to show the power of the West that they are still in 10th seed with a 500 record. But De'Aaron Fox, who's having an absolutely career year, but more so than that, just the way he goes about playing and the way his maturity has risen is something that deserves to be recognized. And I don't know if he's going to get into the All-Star game this year. If it was up to me, I think, there's guys like De'Aaron Fox who actually should be in higher than someone like a Luka Doncic, who is doing so below expectations for what they should be doing. It's almost like, of course, Luka is going to get it. I'm not saying he's not. But what I'm saying is that, if you're hyping up all these guys to get there, this is one of the fastest guys in the league, one of the most athletic guys in the league. And if we're talking about guys who are just monstrous in transition, De'Aaron Fox is someone who pretty much is the poster boy for that kind of game because his speed is insane. He's faster than Westbrook. He's faster than John Wall. Look at him run end to end. I believe it was a year and a half or so ago where they had a thing written down about the guy who was listed to be fastest end to end of the court, and De'Aaron Fox was markedly faster than anyone else in the league. So, in a league that values athleticism alongside skill, people are sleeping on De'Aaron Fox, and I don't like that.
No, that's a fantastic point. I mean, it's also really, really crazy. Like for those who play basketball, it takes a lot of skill to be that quick and still so good. Finishing with, under the basket, right? Yeah. Well, layups going really, really fast. It takes a special kind of finesse to score those layups and stuff like that. So yeah, man, De'Aaron Fox, and he's actually developed a little bit better of like a jumper going, which is great. And then the rookies are actually doing great on Sacramento this year as well, really helping out. But if you're going to speak of guys that probably will go under the radar, I don't know where Gordon Hayward comes into the picture here as well, because I think
you're talking about my boy. I like it.
Monstrous season. And, we talked about earlier, we made some posts on Instagram, and you should definitely check them out in terms of report cards of teams that we felt like made some pretty solid moves or not so solid moves. But Charlotte picking up a guy like Gordon Hayward, who, was pretty much being underutilized in a team and a system like Boston, over guys like, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, comes into a situation where it's a central role. And, people have said, Gordon Hayward has not looked the same when he got injured and blah, blah, blah. But that's just because he wasn't being used. People forget, sometimes it's not necessarily the skill of the player that's changed, even if they're coming back from a serious injury. Yeah. It's just sometimes the team isn't playing him in the successful way that they should, in a way that they would be the most successful. And now he's a central role. And what a time, because you have a guy like LaMelo Ball absolutely playing gorgeous basketball, seriously. And you need a leader and you need a vet who understands the game and has been in situations where it's tough. He's been a clutch player in his own right, and he's been efficient this season too. Absolutely. And so
I mean, look, for years and years and years, I've always talked up Gordon Hayward. And by the way, for Baba's question about it being telecast on IPTV, it absolutely is. If you look for the SportsTrends channel on your IPTV box. I believe it's $12.76 for most people. I may be wrong on that, but it's somewhere close. It definitely is being telecast live, so definitely, tell your friends, get everyone else to join in with us on there. But going back to Gordon Hayward, just first of all, who would have thought that Charlotte would be right in that playoff mix right now?
I did.
But a lot of people didn't, right? We had talked about teams that often get, pushed under the radar, get are completely, almost afterthoughts in the league. And when Gordon Hayward's contract came out, there was a lot of people that were questioning, first of all, Michael Jordan has a terrible record in terms of giving contracts, but this was one contract that I was saying from the top. It's like, look, it's not an overpay. This is what this guy has deserved because of how good he has been. And people are forgetting just because of the fact that he had his injuries. And frankly, he was pushed behind the pecking order in Boston, partly because of that injury and partly because they're so focused on developing both Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown as their, centerpieces, as the guys that they want to go in. But, don't forget about Gordon Hayward was an all-star player when he was on the Utah Jazz.
Oh, yeah.
And he did that as a top-tier team in the West, an incredible defender at the 3 spot, one of the best in that position. And, I mean, at a time, there was like long comparisons about, is he essentially another version of like a Paul George? The way he goes about playing his game is just very, very similar in that, sneaky athleticism and just a very, very quick jumper that he's able to get off at any time. So, those are traits that make essentially a superstar level player. And I've always put Gordon Hayward in that echelon, even though, he's not getting those same plaudits as some of the other guys that are often in there. But, for the Hornets, who are a team that was pretty much with no direction, just tons and tons of, young talent that was kind of being misused. Mm-hmm. But now they've got this like collection of misfits, and it's almost like this scenario of, when the Raptors got everyone together back in, 2013, 2014 and started their whole We the North era. I'm actually seeing that there's a lot of potential in the Charlotte Hornets to do something great. And I want to see them in the playoffs this year because I think they could be a very, very pesky out for any of those top teams.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. It's insane the amount of depth they have. With Devontae Graham, you've got LaMelo Ball, Gordon Hayward, Rozier. Rozier's also falling out this year too. Insane team. And it's actually a really fun team to watch too. And maybe one more player that I just wanted to kind of mention, and in terms of like that all-star spot, now it's slipping my mind. I'm actually really embarrassed about that. But anyway, Charlotte's a great team. It's just, when a successful player is in a much smaller market, it tends to happen, right? They're still going to promote guys. The NBA has their favorites, and Gordon Hayward just wasn't one of those guys because he played for Utah, man. Come on.
I mean, it's all about flavor of the moment as well. LaMelo Ball is 100% the story everyone is talking about on the Charlotte Hornets, and honestly, for good reason, because he's running away with the Rookie of the Year. And as much as, Monty Williams is not a guy as a coach who is really keen on playing rookies big minutes, there's just no way he can keep LaMelo Ball off the floor because the Charlotte Hornets are actually +8 when he's on the floor versus like -6 when he's off. So it's just like LaMelo has become just an incredible pickup for them. Probably if they were to do the draft all over again, he would be going number 1 instead of the number 3 that he did go about going. But no, it's all about stories, and there's just so many good ones that are going on in the NBA. So like I said, share with us, guys that you think have really impressed you this season. Where have you seen the most development? Are these potential runners in the most improved player award? Because to me, there's so many. Obviously, Christian Wood was leading that before his injury. And I mean, there's a number of other ones. Boucher's in the mix as well, right? But it's just, there's so many nice stories. And to me, the level of talent in the NBA has never been higher. And we get to see that night in and night out. And you get to learn about that night in and night out when you follow The Swing at The Swing Podcast on Instagram. Please make sure to do that. We love engaging with you guys. It's all about the people that talk to us, the fans make us. And as we come to a close on this week's episode, remember, we'll be back Tuesday evening with a very special guest. We're going to have Muhammad Tahir Khan joining us on the next episode live on SportsTrends. For those who don't know him, apart from the fact that he's an incredible cricketer, has played with us for many years, but more so than that, he is a high-level sports coordinator at Sheridan College and played varsity basketball with them for many a year and now helps run the basketball department over there. So it is going to be so much fun to be able to have his insight come join us on the show. We're going to get to pick his brain about all the little things because he also has been a coach at that college level for over 5 years. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We look forward to having you back there with us. But until then, this is HK. That's that guy Owais. And we will see you at the next episode of The Swing.
Virtual high five.
Virtual high five. Peace.